This is ClueCon Weekly, the official FreeSWITCH web show produced and broadcasted directly from FreeSWITCH. ClueCon Weekly features live updates from the FreeSWITCH developers and presentations from various pioneers of communications technology. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSWITCH Solutions, the official consulting firm of the FreeSWITCH open source project. Get help from the experts. Visit freeswitch.com. ClueCon, the premier technology conference for telecom, WebRTC, IoT, and all things maker. ClueCon is held every year in Chicago, Illinois, and offers an all-day hackathon and 4 days of technology-rich presentations from developers around the world. Learn more at ClueCon.com or call 877-748-CLUE.
All right, guys, welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is June the 21st, and today we're going to have Andrea, Maccato, and Sherman, and I'm going to murder his last name, from Obihai, is going to be joining us from the West Coast live to talk about a lot of the cool stuff that Obihai is working on these days and some of the new stuff that they've got that you can gain access to. Before we get to those guys, though, we're going to go over to Miss Kathleen King for the news.
Thanks, Ken. First and foremost, if you have not booked your hotel room yet for ClueCon, you need to do that. We are running out of rooms pretty quickly, but they're great. They're beautiful rooms, so go register, sign up, and then check out the training pages on ClueCon.com. If you haven't signed up already, we do offer some really cool trainings at ClueCon this year. We have OpenSIPs training taught by the wonderful OpenSIPs crew, and then we have a FreeSWITCH 2.0 training taught by our very own Brian West, and with help from some community members. And you can sign up for those on ClueCon.com as well. Click the trainings tab to get all the information. And while you're there, get a head start on some of the API challenges and sponsor challenges this year by visiting the Coder Games page. We've got some really cool prizes that we're excited to give away, and you can get a head start on those. Head start of the competition, get some ideas, start looking at the code and the documentation there, and see what you can come up with. And then we'd like to do a shout out to thank Frozen Mountain and Yealink for joining us as ClueCon 2017 sponsors. Very excited to have them joining us this year. It's going to be a really great conference. We have a lot of great sponsors this year. You can see all the information that you could possibly want at ClueCon.com. And if you'd like to sponsor ClueCon, please contact marketing@ClueCon.com. And that's it for me, Ken.
All right. Thank you very much, Kathleen. So today we're going to have Andrea and Sherman from Obihai joining us. Let's go ahead and get these guys up here on screen. So how are you guys doing today?
We're doing good, Ken. Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think it's been a minute since I spoke with you, Sherman. I think last ClueCon.
So.
We spoke about some of your old stuff that you guys worked on in the past before Obihai.
Right. There's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff there. So both you and Andrea have been around, for quite a while in our market here. So why don't each one of you real quick just take turns and let everybody know a little bit more about yourself individually, and then we can talk about Obi and what you guys have coming up.
Okay. Well, my name's Sherman Sholten, and I look after product and marketing and sales here at Obihai. And we'll get into who Obihai is specifically. But like you kind of mentioned, we've been in this voice endpoint game, primarily focused on SIP, but we've worked on some other call control protocols as well. But we've been doing this for, going on probably about 15 years now. And then many of us had experience in telecommunications even before that. So quite a bit of brain trust here at Obihai, and we're located just west of San Jose, just south of Cupertino in a suburb called Campbell, but it's right here in Silicon Valley. And so I'm joined here by Andrea. He's one of our key engineers, software architects here, and I'll let him introduce himself. Andrea Maccato, nice to meet you, and all attending. I'm one of the senior engineers here at Obihai and previous ventures with the same group, and I'm mostly responsible for provisioning management, cloud, that aspect of the functionality of the solution. And I'll be covering one aspect of that today, which I think may be interesting to a fairly wide audience. So hope you enjoy. Okay.
Thanks, guys. So you guys want to, so what can you tell us before we get started about Obihai and a little bit of the history there behind the company?
Okay, sure. So yeah, Obihai, we're a relatively small but growing team of primarily engineers, essentially looking to build a better mousetrap, so to speak. And Andrea is a really good guest to have today, because one of the things that we're going to be talking about is the piece of the mousetrap that has continually been one of the most difficult problems to solve in voice over IP endpoint management and functionality, and that's all around the initial bootstrapping of the device to the service, as well as what happens on the next day that you've got this, assuming everything goes smoothly, getting the service going out to the endpoint, then how do you manage that going forward over the lifetime of the subscriber or the customer, and what are some of the things that we can bring to the table in terms of innovation that make a massive scale voice over IP service just as manageable as the things that people like AT&T and Verizon and Deutsche Telekom and those guys have been building over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And that's kind of the point that we're at now, is all this stuff is going over an IP network, much of it over the top of somebody else's broadband. And how can we bring that same level of reliability to not only the voice piece of the network, but also the management, which is key. So going back on the history of Obihai, many of us are from a company called Sapura, and then even a few of the team were from a company called Komodo. Komodo back in the late 90s was one of the first companies, if not the first, to make a voice over broadband endpoint. And that was even before the term ATA was around. Essentially, Komodo was the company that helped define what an ATA was, and they came up with the term ATA. ATA, for those of you that aren't in the analog space, stands for analog telephone adapter. So this is how you basically made your first IP telephones, is you took an analog phone, plugged it into this box, and voila, you had a device that could communicate on an IP network, just like we have today with so many IP phones, voice video type endpoints. So Komodo was a company that really not only coined the term, but they had the technology that backed it up. And one of the initial companies that was interested in that was, at the time, a startup that was getting a lot of press. It's called Vonage. And so Vonage, if you remember their tagline, they were the broadband phone company. Okay, and this is back in early 2000s by this time, and this is when only probably less than 10% of the U.S. even had broadband. And so this was a very new thing back then. So it's amazing how far we've come since then. But this piece of equipment, in terms of all the CPE and the infrastructure that a service provider has to support, this endpoint is really a linchpin to the lifeblood of the service provider. If it doesn't perform, then you don't have a service. And like I mentioned a little while before, a lot of these services started out as true over-the-top services. Vonage, for example, wasn't an ISP. They were an ITSP, and so they really needed something that was reliable. And so that was the first device. Komodo was acquired by Cisco in 2000, and went on to make a lot. That group went on to make a lot of neat products in this space. In 2003, the same group, same people, exited Cisco and started Sapura. And I think that's when Andrea came in, right? That's when I came into the scene, was with Sapura. And at Sapura, we continued to, develop the technology, to innovate. And one of the key contributions that Sapura brought to this part of the industry was things like HTTPS provisioning. Before it was either if you could even do it remotely, it was FTP or TFTP, some kind of proprietary encrypted binary file that was transported through that. Kind of heavy-handed, I guess you could say. And so bringing HTTPS to the provisioning piece really helped service providers confidently scale secure provisioning. And Andrea was one of the architects that really helped solve that problem at Sapura. And Sapura became one of the, I don't think I'm stretching it to say the kind of the de facto implementation of a voice over broadband device. Many companies kind of followed our lead in how to deploy, how to bootstrap, how to configure a device. In fact, the DSL forum had a working group back then, but it emerged into the TR69 and the voice over IP component of that, which was TR104. If you read through that TR104 and you do a Google search on the Sapura provisioning guide, you see a lot of the same things. So between a huge contributor in Polycom for that standard, as well as Obihai, that was really an important step in kind of the right direction for major telcos to start looking at this as a viable way to deliver a service. So Sapura also ended up being acquired by Cisco. That was at a time when that initial customer Vonage was really ramping up, spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year in advertising, really getting the word out that you could have a phone service over your broadband connection. You didn't have to buy it from the legacy telco. And then many other companies, kind of like Vonage, but with their own approach to marketing and sales, they were coming into the market as well. And this is where, it's kind of right place, right time for many of us in this industry, which was, build a product, build infrastructure, build provisioning systems, create everything that's required for these service providers. And many of them, many of you that are on the video, the conference today, were key individuals as well in building these services. And a lot of it, well, I could say none of it would have happened without open source components in the network, because there's no way that many of these companies could have afforded something or maybe would have even had the functionality that they needed from one of the major infrastructure equipment providers. So, things like what's now FreeSWITCH, as well as Asterisk and Camelio, all three of these things and more open source was used are used like this. And so it's our job to make sure that works. So Sapura was very successful moving into Linksys and then to Cisco. We made all the SPA products, also the PAP2, which is very popular ATA. And then in 2010 is when Obihai was started. So the bulk of the team left Cisco and started Obihai. And then at Obihai, again, there was still that, a lot of people ask, why'd you start Obihai? Why was Obihai, what was the reason? There's already lots of endpoint companies out there that are, people could say it's a relatively commoditized space. Well, from an innovation standpoint, it's still very young, especially if you've been in telecommunications for a period of time, and especially when you look at this aspect of CPE management. And so Obihai saw that there was a convergence of technologies kind of outside the traditional communications or voice over IP communications realm in the form of cloud, to use an overly used term, but the cloud piece, bring it with a voice over IP device, really lends itself to a lot of new innovation. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, kind of how we're using the cloud and some services that we built around that make a better mousetrap in the form of voice over IP endpoints in ATAs and IP phones.
I think they covered it quite well, Sherman. I mean, you talk about the old Vonage ATAs, the old ones. I actually had one of the old 186s.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm familiar with pretty much all those devices that you've mentioned here today.
Does it still work?
I don't have it anymore. It gave up the ghost about 06, I want to say. But yes, that was the old encyclopedia, one volume of the encyclopedia size ATA. When it had would have had one red light on the top of it that would either that would give you a status indication. That was it. Web interface, what is that for?
Right.
Yeah, so those things were actually pretty cool. I think I had that back. I think I got it back in like 2000.
Yeah.
Early Vonage subscriber on there, and I know just look down the list of the people that are actually joining us live today and watching, and I know a lot of other people from the community. They either had these things or some of the other devices that your team has worked on, across the years. I mean, and whether it's Obihai or some of the previous stuff. So. The little bit of history of the company to let these guys know that don't realize what you guys have done in the past, I think is informative for them, so they get an idea of the team. You guys have some really cool stuff, with phones and ATAs and that kind of thing over the course of time. So what we can do here is let's go ahead and I think it's probably get your slides up, and then we can let you guys kind of go with what you want to talk about today.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, we're still, after all these years, we're still very excited about what can be done in this industry, and how to help service providers and resellers succeed. And this is where we really derive a ton of satisfaction in what we do when we see a service provider who's successful with our endpoints. And if you look in the back in the past, companies like Nextiva, RingCentral, Vocalocity, which is now part of Vonage, they all built their initial service on our products. And this is kind of where I'm saying is we're just beginning in this. And so we're excited to kind of show you what we've got today. We're really excited to also be a sponsor of ClueCon coming up. Is that next month? No, in August. And then we're busy as well coming up with something interesting for the hackathon and the Coder Games. So stay tuned and look out for that. So I already went through this in the last bit that I was talking about. But yeah, Obihai's been around since 2010, and everything that we do, for the most part, is done here in Campbell, California. So all the design, software design, the hardware design, all the development, all of the firmware is done here in Campbell, California. And then I mentioned some of the customers that we were successful with back at Sapura and Linksys and Cisco. We're kind of continuing that tradition here at Obihai. Clearly, because of the pedigree of the engineering team, it really helps open doors for us, and we have been thankful for many service providers going ahead and qualifying and deploying our products, and we're really thankful for that. I'll just quickly go through the product lineup, because just so you kind of have an idea on what's at the end of this management tether, so to speak, to the cloud that we're going to spend most of the time today talking about. But Obihai, like I said, we monetize our innovation through selling voice over IP endpoints, so in the form of IP phones and phone adapters. We also make a variety of IP phones. We make low density ATAs, 1 and 2 port. We make ones that are a little bit more of a kind of a gateway functionality. A lot of them are used for SIP trunking applications or multi-tenant, hotels, that kind of thing, that are 4 or 8 ports. Lots of functionality we can build onto those platforms too, as we see more, security requirements or other types of media requirements. We can build into these ATA devices, because not only do they connect telephones and fax machines and alarm panels and other kind of voice band data type devices like credit card swipers, that kind of thing, but they also can be bridges, and they themselves can act as a B2B UA. So there's a ton of functionality that we can put in there, in addition to things like auto attendance and things that kind of complement what FreeSWITCH, for instance, does in the cloud. We also make accessories. The accessories are kind of a neat thing that we do here, which it easily enables you to, for instance, use the USB port on the devices to connect the endpoint to a Wi-Fi access point, or to connect the endpoint to pair it with a cell phone via Bluetooth, or to use the Bluetooth functionality with a headset. We also, FXO is one of those things that's you never know when you're going to need it, and we don't either. And so we made an accessory where you can use the USB port to connect an FXO line. That can be a telco line, or that can be, say, something off of like we see it a lot with building phone systems, things to open gates and open doors. That's where that FXO device really comes in handy. Then obviously we treat the device management platform, we call the ObiTalk DMP, we treat that as a product. So that's something that we spend a lot of time on, as well as the whole zero-touch customization, the redirection and provisioning. We've done a lot of work there, way above and beyond what I would say any of our peers are doing, to really help the service providers reliably bootstrap the endpoint using a variety of methods, to the point where the service provider doesn't even have to know what type of device, much less the MAC address is, to be able to bind it to their account. So we've got APIs for that as well. So the phones, just quickly, we've got 3 models out today in the 1000 series. We will be introducing a whole new line of phones very soon, possibly in Chicago, so stay tuned for that. But today we've got the Obi 1022, the Obi 1032, and the Obi 1062. They all have color displays. They all support zero-touch provisioning and customization. They all have HD audio, including the Opus codec, and a variety of headset options. The 1032 and the 1062 do support EHS with the more traditional RJ9 connector for the headset. And so then here in the slides, you can see how many line keys and call appearances. But of course, there's much more to these than just these, high-level, selling points. So, feel free to give me a call or contact me offline to get more information about these phones, or to get some demo phones that you can test out yourselves. On the ATAs, we do have kind of 2 segments, 2 categories. One is the OB2 and the OB3 series that have either 1 or 2 FXS ports. Again, they all have a USB port, or in the case of the OB5 series, they have 3 USB ports. The OB5 series either has 4 or 8 FXS ports. They also feature a line in and line out audio port that's SIP addressable, and that comes in handy for things when you have a public address system that you want to create an extension for. You don't need a separate device to build that functionality immediately into the network, because you've got that audio line out to feed into the PA system. All the devices support 5REN, which means they can really pump out the dial tone over long distances. These days, REN doesn't mean much to most people. I don't know if ringer equivalency number is what REN stands for, and to be 1 REN, that was what it took to ring the mechanical bell on the old school telephones, right? And so they came up with this ringer equivalency number to to signify the right amount of voltage that was required to do that. And they figured this is probably going back to Bell days, AT&T days, where they were installing these phones in people's homes. So they figured, well, the maximum amount of phones somebody's going to have in their house, let's say, is 5. It's probably well under that. But they made the switch vendors or the hardware component of their company that made the line interfaces support 5 REN, so that a customer could have 5 phones in their house, and when a call was sent down the copper line to ring those phones, up to 5 phones would ring. Let's say you had 5 phones, but you only supported 2 REN, then probably none of the phones are going to ring because there's just not enough voltage there. So that's where the REN comes from. But today that kind of also signifies the amount of length that you can drive dial tone. So at a certain length, I don't know, somewhere around maybe 15,000 feet, you'll still have enough juice to ring 1 REN. And by the way, you can look at the bottom of a telephone to see what REN value it is. Most cordless base stations, because they're powered, they only require about maybe half a REN to ring them. So anyway, this is very analog type stuff, but it's important for us to deliver these services. And I'll support the zero-touch provisioning, support for T38 fax, as well as very liable for fax over a G711 connection. There's a lot of smarts that's built in here, given the fact that we've got the engineering team here in Campbell that really can develop down to the DSP level. So there's things that we can do when we recognize it's a fax machine, or when we recognize that it's a voice band data application to make that call more reliable. And so that's one of the reasons why we have been so fortunate to get the big customers that we have today, because they're immediately proven in their labs to be superior over other things that are out there. Now we're going to jump into the meat of the presentation today, about talking about management. And so just to kind of give you a baseline of kind of what I call the eras of management. And so this is the device, Ken, that you were talking about that you had, the old Cisco ATA-186. That's what I call the primordial era. So the management, there really was no management. There was a telephone UI. There were beeps and codes that you had to enter via the telephone. There was maybe very little ring back, or even no read back of what's going on, so it's tough to tell. Well, that, fortunately, this voice over IP thing really took off, and that gave way to more R&D to help develop this, to the point that that next product there is a SPA 2000, and that's what I call the set, ship, and pray era. So even though we were starting to develop functionality into the endpoints where they could be managed remotely, either via FTP. We even had fancier web pages that you could, local web pages that, if you were smart, you could access through a pinhole in the firewall, or port forwarding or something. It was really still the very beginnings of using HTTP and using an XML file delivered over a secure channel to manage these devices. So many service providers, they would locally set up the config, they would maybe password protect it, and then they would ship it out to the customer. But then from a management standpoint, they really had very little they could do at that point. So that's the pray part. You just hope that you don't have to manage that unit, because there's a good chance back then you just had to ship a whole new device out to the customer, even though it was just a potentially configuration issue. Then, as things evolve, we get into the remote provisioning and redirect era. Not a lot of people know that this whole redirection thing was really invented by this team here, so that we could more efficiently manufacture units and get the volumes of units that we had to produce into the customer's hands sooner, as opposed to making a customized device in the factory. These factories are all in Asia, and it takes time to either send them by a plane, or preferably send them by a boat. And so if the service provider wants a kind of a customized way to provision the unit, meaning that the device already knows that it belongs to that service provider, and it calls home to their provisioning server for its initial bootstrap config file, well, you could do that in China, but then wow, that makes it tough to do business, because now you've got to ask the service provider to place an order up to 3 months in advance of when they need it. And that's almost impossible for, all of us that have been involved in growing businesses. Forecasting during the huge growth phase of your business is nearly impossible. So the way that we solved that at Linksys and Cisco was we invented this remote customization functionality, which allowed us to postpone the bootstrapping of the device directly to the service provider until ultimately it was either in the fulfillment warehouse of the service provider, or it could have even been in the residence or the business of the subscriber, because what the device would do is call home securely via to a redirection server, and then we would send it on its way. So the vast majority of service provider devices that are deployed today use this type of technology that we did back then. So now we get into the Obihai and why Obihai. So this this ability to manage devices via a separate tether to the ObiTalk cloud, the ObiTalk device management platform, it's really useful, and we can use it in a lot of ways, both to help our business and help the business of our partners. So one of the things that it's benefited us immediately in the history of this company was what we call the BYOD functionality. BYOD in our endpoints allows somebody to literally buy this device at a place like Amazon or Newegg or Walmart or Best Buy, and they can use the cloud tether that comes with the device to configure their own device via a browser. And using the ability to bind that ObiTalk end user, we call it our retail portal, the ObiTalk BYOD end user to their device, well, now we can present them with other things like, do you want to sign up for a service that we have on the portal, or do you want to use one of our configuration templates for a SIP account that you already have that you want to use with the device? So you bypass that whole step of having to, get the IP address of the unit, point your browser at it, configure it, and either you're configuring it for a provisioning server, or in the case of the BYOD, you've got the SIP information already, and so you're doing that. So we kind of took that complexity, put it into a browser, which was much more easy, much easier for the end user, to the point that I like to say to people that we're talking about, many moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas are able to use our products, whereas just 5 years ago, forget it. The only way was if a service provider shipped you something that was truly plug and play. Now, at the same time that we had all this BYOD success in the market, we're also developing the platform for service providers. This is for a single customer to manage thousands or hundreds of thousands and even millions of devices. And so, but then you kind of have to, the portal's good for that, but then now you have to kind of take things up a level to an API. And it's not too hard to see that, well, the portal can be based on an API, and then we can just kind of repurpose that API that we use for the portal for a service provider. So we'll talk about that. So that cloud management piece is really useful for service providers. And the other thing that we can bring to this now is we have this out-of-band network management tether, or device management tether. And so we can report back information from the endpoint into the cloud for that service provider, and that it almost gives the semblance of a SNMP type interface for these devices that are deployed over who knows what network and behind who knows what router. So this is where SNMP obviously would fail. You can't actually use, and SNMP is a great protocol for management, but it's not useful in many implementations of a voice over IP service. So this out-of-band management tether that is secure to the ObiTalk cloud as well as to the service provider's cloud or the service provider's browser, that's really been one of the more innovative and one of the most exciting things, and really something that I feel is pushing it forward. There's an old telco term, and I think there's a Wikipedia article on this, called FCAPS. So FCAPS is an ancient term for what you would have to build into your product before you even deployed it as a service. And so FCAPS is fault configuration, accounting, performance, and security. So we're with the ObiTalk device management platform, we're really bringing this kind of FCAPS management into the current products to the point that the Obihai products, it's really taken a platform approach to customer premise equipment and and the management of that, and it's really meant to simplify the life of our partners and potentially their resellers too. This whole management platform can be segmented into sub-accounts, so to speak, so that if you're, say, a wholesale service provider and you want your resellers to be super successful managing their own customers and your own customers' endpoints, well, then this is a great tool. You have to be smart about it. You have to organize it, build it into your platform. But that's really what the API is there to do. And we can do a lot of things with this tether that many of them are kind of super secret ideas today, but we can really solve a lot of problems when we've got this connection to the endpoints that both reads information from the network as well as we can configure the endpoints or change the configurations or tweak the configurations as well. And given that it's a cloud service, very flexible in terms of deployment, and it's portable, right? So in the future we can even take it. We have our own cloud, but this could be ported to anybody's cloud, for example. And it really helps us drive our roadmap forward, because there are things that we can do in the cloud that maybe somebody who doesn't have this functionality, they'd have to do it in firmware, or they couldn't do it at all. So it's really a competitive advantage as well. So in effect, it's a cloud within a cloud, because the service provider is really the cloud, right? They're offering services directly to their subscribers, be they residential or small businesses or big enterprises. And so the ObiTalk is really just it's like a configuration service. It's a alerting service. It's a lot of things today. It's a lot more things tomorrow. And so that's really one of the things that we've done to innovate. Here's a snapshot, but Andrea was showing you a live version, but it all starts out, or doesn't all start out, but on the face of it, there's a portal. There's various things that we can build into the portal. It's not the most beautiful web page. We're working on that, but it does get the job done, and it is something that we can improve over time. But there's already a ton of information in there. In order to get access to this portal with your devices, all you have to do is go either send an email to us, either Sherman@obihai.com or sales@obihai.com. You can even go to our website, go to service provider products, and apply as a partner. We'll get back to you, and we will give you access to the device management portal, if it's appropriate for your business. And then we'll take you through how do devices get added to your portal. Are they going to be added before we ship them to you? Is the distributor that you're working with, will they add them to your portal for you? Are you going to use one of our APIs when the customer uses, say, the service activation code to add it to the portal? Or are you going to claim them to your portal yourself? There's lots of different ways that the devices get added to the portal, and before you start to use it. And then one of the neat things that is available is this kind of, this is a good example of how the API can be used, is we have a feature on the portal called Deployment Snapshot. This is just this particular one is our kind of one of our internal deployments. We create a kind of a mock service provider, and we only have 44 units in this one, but we have service providers with many thousands of units in theirs, but I'm not going to show you theirs. And so this is one that we've created, and you can see we have various models listed, the service provider statistics, the service statistics for the SP1. There are multiple services that can be configured on the device. You can see those if you want. And then this particular view brings out what firmware is running on those devices. And again, this is just an example of what can be done with information that you can gather from the API and then present it however you want. So I don't know, maybe now's a good time to get into the API, and so you can go over this and then jump into the screen.
Okay, well, thank you, Sherman. I think you've already done the whole talk for me. So I'll let me do this. So this is a live view of the actual portal. I won't talk about the portal at all, except to indicate that when you do get an account, you do have a service API link that opens onto this document, which is basically a live document, meaning that you can interact with the API itself. And so recently I've been doing a lot of document writing for what it's worth. And so the idea here is that we have created an API that allows a service API that gives you a set of functions that overlap a lot with the portal, but allow you to automate a lot of these functions over your entire deployment or a subset of the deployment. And so specifically, these are the features that are available today through the API. I don't know if this is large enough to read. Let me try to do something here.
That's actually a pretty good font size.
This is probably a little better. Okay, there we go. So basically, through the API today, that I will describe in a second, you can fetch information about Obihai models, organizational hierarchy. We have a hierarchical structure that you can organize your ITSP devices under. You can fetch and update different types of configurations and profiles relating to the provisioning piece. You can get device state and device status, various values directly from the devices wherever they are, and you can manage the ownership of the devices as well as control them. What does this look like? Well, this is basically a REST-like API, fairly standard, and so taking curl as an example here, you can basically create a session and get a token back, right? So you would HTTPS post to this particular endpoint, which is one of our servers in the cloud, and have a JSON payload that includes your credentials, your login credentials. And the reply that comes back will include a token. Once you have the token, you can then access the other endpoints within this API. And so, for example, you could query among your devices via MAC address, for instance, and get an ID for a specific device. Here is the ID. You can use the ID to then, for example, do a basic sanity check on the device itself. So here you would post and create what we call a quick values sub-resource of the device itself. Here we have devices and ID. Again, all of these requests need to bear the token that we got with the session. And in this particular case, we are looking for whether the device is online or not. And let's say the device is online. Okay, great. So now we can operate on the device. So for example, we could reboot the device. And so through this cloud tether, we can do another HTTP post through the service API to this same device ID and hit this other sub-resource, reboots. And this will create a reboot event. And if that event returns with an acknowledgement that we know that the device itself received the reboot command, then more likely than not is actually in the process of rebooting. And then here we go. At the end of the whole session, we can close it by just deleting the session, providing the token, and further requests will be unauthorized. So what can you do with this API? What kind of resources do we expose? And so this is the current version of what we expose, and you can reach two types of configurations: base profiles, which are meant to be basically deployment-wide, or at least aggregates of devices, settings that you want all of these devices to carry. And so a base profile would basically contain some name that you can assign, a type of base profile, so this could be either a basic profile with a set of parameters or a container profile that aggregates multiple sub-base profiles. And then each of these, assuming it's a base profile, for example, will contain a specific set of settings, where settings is parameter value pairs. And in particular, we have this concept of use default, whereby rather than setting a specific value, you can tell the device, just reset yourself to whatever your default value is. And of course, there are, so here would be a basic type of device, and you can perform various operations on the base profiles. You can list your base profiles, you can get a specific base profile, you can update the base profile, or you can replace the base profile. You then have configurations, so these are individual device configurations. That's the concept here. And so for a specific device, there are actually multiple types of configurations, but the primary one would be the one that is writable, meaning that the cloud holds a configuration for a specific device, and then this will be aggregated with the base profiles associated with the device and then pushed down to the endpoint. And here again, there are a few types. So let's go in and try something. You can list devices and so forth. So one thing that we have done with this documentation to help the developer is create what we call a live request. So with a live request, you can actually play with the API itself and get results and explore the API independently of your own application. And so this is an example of a live request on an endpoint. So this would allow you to list your entire devices, your entire deployment, or a specific device if you wanted to filter by some of these devices. So this, conveniently tells you that we don't have a token yet. So let me jump over here to the session entity and create a token for us. And so I will do this. We have a built-in editor that kind of reminds you of when some items may be out of order. And I will enter a credential for which I am plugging in our ClueCon 2017. And here we go, submit the request, wait a couple of seconds, and here we have, unauthorized. What did I do? Okay, sorry. Wrong credential. Try this again. All right, we're good. So we have our token. Here it is. And tokens expire in an hour, but basically they can be renewed. So now that we have the token, let's now go back to our devices list collection. Let's see our 44 devices in our test environment. And here they are. Okay, so this lists all of our devices. All the outputs and inputs here are JSON pretty much. And so I can maybe identify one of these devices. Let's say, so here is the ID of the device, or we can go my MAC address. So suppose that I had a MAC address and wanted to find just this one device. So I could then filter by MAC address. And you see that our live document conveniently indicates to you what the URL really should be. And with this payload token, we resubmit the request. And now we have the reply that only contains the one device we're looking for. So let's look at this device, for example. Let me copy the ID of the device, which identifies the device within our database. And so it is an independent identifier. And let's go down to the instance, where we can now plug in the ID. And so this would be devices, and then the ID of the device, submit the request, and here in the response is again our one device. The device is of type 14, okay? So what is type 14? Well, we have a device types resource where we can get an instance. The device type was device 14, and so let's see what kind of information we can get from that. And then we'll see, okay, well, ID 14 device type happens to be an OB1022, the low-end phone, which is a 5-line phone, a brief description. Okay, so something like this would be useful if there is a user interface where one is wanting to display some options to a user. And so some of this kind of model information is available to these as well. What else can I do? Well, there are several other configurations here, resources that are available. For example, these parameters. Well, actually, let's go back to device types. Device types. I can list the parameters that are available for each device type. So if I go back to device type 14, which was the 1022, I can then ask for the sub-resource params, which tells me all of the configurable parameters that are available on that particular model of the device. And so here we see that the parameters have a name, a default value, and an ID, a particular ID for a device. Okay? And so with that ID, I can then create payloads that allow me to set or modify parameters on individual devices. Okay, and so forth. So there are several other resources along the way. So what kind of applications can we apply with this? So we provide as part of the document some examples, and the examples happen to be written in JavaScript running on an Node.js environment, but they're kind of high level enough to be used as templates for other languages as well. We provide a thin layer of abstraction in an OBTalk, what we call an OBTalk library, which provides some basic wrapping of opening and closing the session, and then getting and posting patch and put operations on resources. But so let's look at a specific example. So get basic device status, right? So if we want to get basic status on a number of devices, so this is the idea of automating the function that you already get through the portal, but being able to do it on multiple devices via a script, then you could do this. You could open the session, get and index the device types collection, so you have a sense of what all the device types correspond to. Optionally, look at sub-organization device collection, so identify a sub-organization to query. Get all the devices from that sub-organizations, and then iterating all of those devices in that reply, you can post to the devices quick values sub-resource and get status on the device. Resolve the device type using the table we obtained here in step 2. Write the whole thing to some output, maybe a CSV file, and then close the session. Okay, so this is what the application code might look like. Again, this is JavaScript, but it could be any language really, as long as you can do an HTTPS connection. Some preliminaries, load our thin library, get some defaults from the command line, enter your credentials, maybe from the environment. Open the session, perform the basic tasks, and then eventually close the session. What are the tasks? Well, we are going to get and index the device types, identify the organization we want to look at the devices of, get all of those devices in the organization, and then for each device, apply some mapping, and then stringify the results and write to file. So what would we want to do for each device? Well, get the quick values and then extract from the result data, maybe a MAC address, the type, device type name, the model name, whether the device is online or not, and perhaps the firmware version that the device is running. Okay, so what would an example run look like? And so here is a snapshot. Enter your credentials, run node, and then run the script. In this particular case, I've enabled logging for each individual request and response from the server. There are various, logging you can perform, but this gives you a feel of, okay, you run back and forth with this REST API, and you get a set of results and as the result. So this is one type of thing that you could do. There are many other examples that we provide as part of this documentation, and all of these are kind of runnable examples from the API. Given that we are short in time, I would just like to indicate that in the appendix we provide obviously some details about the interface itself, and it's basically over HTTPS with this particular server. And currently we are at V1, and hopefully we'll remain at V1 for a long time. Yeah, so let me just jump to what can you do with this. You can do obviously a lot, but this is one example that you can do, and that is you can visualize your entire deployment. So this is what Sherman was indicating earlier. We do this on behalf of the ITSPs once a day. So this is basically, indeed, as of about 6 hours ago, early this morning. And so here are the models in our mock ITSP. And for example, maybe I can just focus on the phones. So we have what we have. We have 28 phones with various models in the deployment. This is the line 1 status on those 28 phones. This is a sample pending. A number of them are offline for various reasons. And so here we go. 11 of them are registered. And for one of them, service is not configured. So we have about 12 devices left. And this is the firmware that those 12 devices are running. In particular, the selection sample under here indicates the selection, here it is. These are the 12 phones that we're looking at. If I were only interested, for example, in the ones running this particular firmware, then this would be the 3 phones we're talking to. And the link here takes us to the particular phone instance.
Are there any on there that are not registered?
Yes. So if I...
no, it looks like they're all going to register, right?
Well, sorry, not configured.
Okay.
So.
Well, one of the nice things is maybe go into one that's registered.
Okay.
So go into like a...
So these 2 are registered. Okay. I may have to log in again for this. Login expired. So let me do this. All right. So this is the device that we are looking at. And in particular, once we are here, of course, we are back on the portal, clearly. And we have actions that we can perform on the device. We can look at the local configuration. You can look at which is on the phone itself. We can look at the configuration in the cloud for that phone. We can touch the device. We can acquire a PCAP. We can get some syslogs from the device, perform a speed test, do some CPLG testing. We can upgrade the phone and so forth.
So one thing that's nice about this view, and this is again the device management platform portal is, this SP1, this Service 1 status is registered. But if that wasn't registered, it would also give you the SIP error code, and that would help you troubleshoot if it could be a server issue or if it's a password issue or something like that. And then you can, like Andrea showed below, there's a syslog that you could immediately open up on that device and watch it register and see, what's, potentially where it's breaking, where that registration is breaking. So that's a neat thing. Or even go a little bit deeper and grab a PCAP file to really look closely at what's going on with that device locally. So these are some of the things that we've exposed on the portal. But again, those three circles where we show the models, their SP1 status, and the firmware, that's really just an example of what we've done using the things that Andrea just went through with you on the live document to get information from your deployed devices, query their status of the devices you want to get information from, query their status, and in this particular instance, we're pulling out the firmware version. But you can do other things as well with this.
Should I give them a preview?
Sure.
I'll give you guys a preview of. No, sorry, wrong document. This one. Yeah, there you go. I'll give you guys a quick preview of what's coming up in the next few days, weeks, I don't know. An enhanced version of the same idea that actually shows you line 2, line 3, and so forth, right? And then you can also check base profile. Again, this is something that the API exposes. And you can play with this. I mean, you can provide different visualizations for your end customers or end users. And the interesting thing about this sort of functionality is that it's device-centric. So it's a multi-tenant, device-centric view that you can use kind of as a complement to a PBX-centric view, registration-centric view of devices. And so,
right. So if
you can probe on the device.
Yeah, so like for instance, if your business model is more of a service provider's service provider, you have some type of wholesale or private label type service, this the architecture of the device management platform can be it's done in such a way that you could present your customers' devices to them and them only. You are the top level kind of domain administrator, but then you can break up your customers into sub accounts, and then they can also get access to this information just for their devices that you've assigned to them.
In fact, I forget where I was. Was I here? Is this our login? Let me see if I refresh this. Am I still logged in? Okay, I'm still logged in, so I could from here, for example, something we did not talk about was the fact that there are sub-organizations, so there is a hierarchical structure of ITSPs and organizations. And so as a VAR or as an over-the-top service provider, you can have your own kind of sub-organizations where you can group devices and again have views of them that are specific. So, okay, and that's it. That's what we have today. Sorry for the long talk.
No, that's okay. There's some really cool stuff in here. And we've got a few minutes for questions here. And I know, Kathleen, didn't you have a question for these guys?
Yeah, can you just clarify sort of the difference between FXO and FXS?
Sure. So on an analog telephone adapter, typically there's just an FXS port. So that normally goes by foreign exchange station. Well, that means that interface is for a station or a telephone or a fax machine. And then the way that I kind of think of it is an FXS port generates dial tone. So it almost acts like the office. So think of the OB device, the ATA device, is like a little central office switch that's providing analog phone service. And so the FXS is the port that gives a dial tone to whatever it's connected to. So that's important in the case of a phone or fax machine. It has to, when you go off hook, it's waiting for that dial tone to communicate with the switch. So FXO is a foreign exchange office. So FXO is the interface that's used to communicate with the office. So FXS is the interface used to communicate with a system, a system or an endpoint. And foreign exchange office is the interface that's used to communicate with the office. So it expects a dial tone at the other end. It expects to be fed a dial tone. So FXS generates a dial tone for the device. FXO expects to receive a dial tone through the interface to communicate. So, for instance, a voice over IP gateway would be FXO to the PSTN gateway network that it's gatewaying to.
Cool. Thank you.
And real quick, just a quick follow up on this. I already know the answer to this one, but I want to hear you say it, Sherman. What happens when you plug an FSS? When you plug an FXS into an FXS and try to ring it?
Well, I don't know. A lot of
recommended.
You can, well, in our world, you can actually damage the FXS port that is being rung to because it's a kind of an over voltage situation. And I don't know what else might happen. You get all kinds of weird behavior with maybe other devices that are connected on that same circuit.
So in other words, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of the reasons why you see in a lot of these voice over IP deployment kind of DIY forums when people want to, get rid of their legacy phone company who's bringing in a line from the outside. They always tell them to make sure you disconnect your home wiring from the outside service coming in before you connect it to your internet broadband service via a device like an ATA.
Cool. Now, you guys mentioned that you are coming to ClueCon and that you're going to be that you are sponsoring ClueCon this year. Are we going to see any of these new devices and stuff at ClueCon? You guys going to be bringing those?
Yeah, definitely. We're working on some really cool new phones. We will have those at ClueCon to show and demo to you. We have some really neat applications that we're driving to those phones that are also cloud-based. One of the other things that we're able to do with our partners and the existence of our cloud interface is we're able to bring kind of some interesting functionality to the phones. For instance, if you build kind of an app in your cloud, you can drive text messaging, for example, or multimedia messaging to the interface of the phone. So we'll have a demo that can do that, and some kind of other cool things as well that we'll show on those new devices.
So anybody else have questions for Sherman or Andrea today? Let's see here, run through. I think because you guys have covered, Sherman, I think you covered what you guys have been, where you guys have been, and where you guys are headed pretty well. And then Andrea, the demo of the API is quite informative, so we know where to look there now. And so, and I know you guys for any URLs that you guys want to give out, please let us know, because we'll be posting those below this video on YouTube, so everybody can go take a look at that. And
I would say our website, the Obihai website, is always this work in progress, and part of the we will be relaunching the website soon. but probably for this audience, one of the best URLs would be obihai.com/partner. That's really where most of the information that pertains to the more technically astute kind of service provider, system integrator crowd is at that obihai.com/partner. And then feel free to send email to either info@obihai.com or sales@obihai.com, or feel free to send directly to me. Like I don't get enough email already, but that's fine. Sherman, SHERMAN @obihai.com.
All right, guys. Well, I want to say thanks to Sherman and Andrea. Thank you guys again for joining us today. It's always good to see you guys around. For you guys that want to see these guys in person, y'all come out to ClueCon. They'll be there. They have a booth. Last year they had a lot of cool stuff from some of the old stuff that they did. In fact, I think you had an ATA 186 there last year. And so I know he just told us he's going to have all the new stuff there too. So you guys come out and check that out. So thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Sherman. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up for today. It's been fun with these guys. Next week, let's see here, we've got the guys from Flow Route are going to be joining us, talking about some cool stuff. So you guys be back here at noon Central on the 28th. We'll see you guys then, and have a great week.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, or visit us online. Please follow the FreeSWITCH team on Twitter and Facebook by visiting our site at freeswitch.org.